I was riveted by it, and it was infuriating and frustrating.
We're talking about a documentary on Netflix. It is called Power. It is about police brutality, which may sound like a topic that you don't want to hear about, but this film is so well made that you really should check it out. Alonso, please tell us about it.
In this kind of democracy, who is more powerful? The people or the police?
So yeah, this is the latest from Yance Ford, who did A Strong Island a few years back, and it's a really it's about police brutality, but it's about the nature of policing in general. Like when, why, how do we even have police forces in this country and in, sort of civilization in general? And Ford does a really great job of kind of tracking it down to, you always hear, oh, well, it sprang out of the old slave patrols. And that's certainly part of the truth. Also, policing stems out of the conquest of the continent and taking land away from the indigenous people. It also came from quelling labor union riots and providing muscle for the wealthy and the establishment to put down, unionists or immigrants or anybody else that was sort of a threat to what was deemed the public order. But, who's public, whose order? And taking us all the way right up to right now. And so Ford talks to a lot of different academics and experts in the field, several former police officers, who basically talk about just the sort of systemic threat of the police against what is supposed to be a democracy, what is supposed to be a place where people are free and people have say and dominion over their own lives. But the police sort of operate at this other level where they're kind of allowed, as somebody said, you might think the most powerful person in this country is Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, but none of those people can shoot you in the chest and get away with it. But most police officers can and do. So it's upsetting and disturbing, but I think very important, and a movie that I think anybody who wants to have a conversation about how this country really works and who the systems benefit and who they don't benefit, this is a really great starting point. And even if you disagree with what this documentary is about, I think it is incumbent upon you to at least listen to what this documentary is about. And if you have objections, if you have counter arguments, to make good faith ones, because I think what this movie is presenting very clearly and very well backed up is that, we are living in a police state. And if that's not something that you feel on a day-to-day basis, you're part of that group that the police state is there to protect.
Yeah, I was so impressed with the way that Ford got his arms around so much in a very efficient amount of time. This movie is only an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
Like, this could be an entire semester college course.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And he distills it down into like the simplest and most powerful terms. And it sounds like it's going to be an eat your vegetables movie and very didactic and academic. And he does have a lot of extremely intelligent, intellectual people as talking heads, professors and people who've worked in policy and who really studied this. But it builds with a tension and a momentum that is gripping. And in between all of those, very clear-eyed and very intelligent conversations, you also have more personal stuff on the ground. I think a lot of the more impactful stuff occurs with the one police supervisor in Minneapolis.
Yes.
Who was one of the rare Black men on the force and to ascend the ranks. And he's been there for decades. And he thought, oh, I can improve things from the inside.
Yeah.
Right. I can make sure that people aren't being profiled, that people are being looked out for, and realize like the system is larger than one person's ideology, or best intentions. And so that sort of, it's frustrating. You feel his frustration and yet also his hope that he's, after all this time, still wants to do the right thing and help his community.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the movie also really, if you come into this thinking that like, oh, this is going to be very sort of politically slanted, it's like, there's this montage where you see Republican president after Republican president talking about law and order and the police, blah, blah, and then you see Obama and Biden saying the same shit.
And Clinton in the 90s. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, it is this thing where everybody has to toe this line and nobody wants to be the one to say, you know what, maybe we are putting too much money that could be used in other ways in the community into the police force. Maybe we shouldn't be giving the police force military grade weapons. Maybe we should ask some harder questions about who's policing the police, who watches the watchmen. And it's certainly not happening in either party right now.
And it's not going to change in Congress.
No. Oh, heavens.
Because they need that support, right? They need to make people think that they look tough on crime.
Exactly.
And they need the money financially for their campaigns.
Yeah. And everybody who talks about being tough on crime never wants to talk about why do people feel the need to shoplift from the Rite Aid. And it's never about like, well, let's maybe improve wages. Let's, have better programs that allow people access to, food and medicine and diapers. It's always like more cops.
Yeah. I thought another one of the really most effective parts of this was the young Indian man, an Indian American man talking about stop and frisk.
Yeah.
Right. And so and we see it in action. We see footage of, police just stopping people randomly on the street, like a group of like black teenagers on the sidewalk just get stopped for being black teenagers on the sidewalk. And he talked about how you become the thing that they accuse you of being, right? Like, may as well, they're going to think I'm up to no good. So what's the point of fighting? Why not be up to no good? And he presented it in a way that was vulnerable and personal and must happen to so many people every single day in this country. So, and also the idea of like the police being militarized and the military becoming the police like that symbiotic thing, and how it has improved neither institution.
Absolutely. and I didn't know the whole thing about how, like, after the riots of the late 60s, that, LBJ commissions this report, and the report is basically saying, there's like poverty and like issues that we need to deal with regarding, jobs and wages. And then also we need to like, improve the policing, and everybody just listened to the policing half of that. And that was what everybody jumped on and like passed legislation about. And the whole other part about, jobs and wages and economic inequality, that gets ignored. So yeah, this movie's wrapping its arms around a lot. And I think you're right. In 90 minutes, it covers a lot of ground, and it is emotional and upsetting and disturbing. It's a tough watch at times. And, and as soon as I turned it off, like I opened up Facebook and saw like, breaking news stories about stuff like this, and just being like, oh boy, here we go.
You know what? That happened to me too, Alonso. After I stopped watching this, I just flipped over to MSNBC for a second, and they were doing a story about that 23-year-old airman in Florida who was shot in the doorway of his apartment because they went to the wrong place. Right. Deputies were called for some domestic disturbance. They're looking around like, oh, is it that apartment? Is it that one? So they knock on the door. He is military. He is in Florida. He has a gun because he can.
Yes.
So he's a black man in his own doorway with a gun in his hand, and they shot him and killed him. And he was this decorated young airman. So yes, same thing happened to me. Like, it is up to the second in terms of its relevance, unfortunately.
Yeah. And again, it ties into the larger issue of, white supremacy in this country, and how it has, been boiled into the system and has, been part of America as long as there's been an America, but it's so much else, and all of it is terrible. And I think this movie, again, it's an important first step in sort of figuring out what kind of changes can be made. And if you are someone who is inclined to think that this is a bunch of liberal nonsense, watch the movie. And if you have cogent, like counter arguments, then please make them. But do not reject this movie out of hand, because even if it's telling you stuff you don't want to hear, it's speaking the truth.
Yeah, I learned a lot. And then I had a discussion with Chris and Nick about it over dinner a couple nights later, like, hey, I watched this movie and here's what it's about. And it sparked a really good conversation. So for that alone, it is very much worthwhile. So what is your number?
I would say a 9. I was riveted by it, and it was infuriating and frustrating, and it makes me want to learn more and sort of figure out what individual citizens can do about this.
Yeah, I will say an 8.5, because I would say for a little while, it's a little dry for a little while, but it definitely builds and builds. And so Power is out on Netflix right now. Please watch it.